Do you know that 61% out of all major BreadTubers identify as queer, including 31% trans or non-binary and 22% trans alone? Out of all of their content in the past 10 videos, each of them had made about 0.6 videos on average that are concerning capitalism, the working class, or economic inequalities, or 26 out of 410 videos in total, while just 41% of BreadTubers didn't have one or more trans thumbnails or video titles in the last 10 videos, meaning that in 59% of the cases in their past 10 videos, at least one video had covered trans people. That's right, trans people alone, thus excluding other identity groups such as blacks or lesbians. Hello, my name is Ubersoy and I'm glad to be back. Evidently, it is now very trendy to determine the various demographic characteristics of the people present at various shows or podcasts, or perhaps just one characteristic of them. I decided to follow the trend, but make it better.
You can always be thinner. Look better.
That's right, I have compiled a whole list of BreadTubers and determined their demographic variables under various categories through watching their content, asking other people for their opinions, and leaving my initial drafts for critique so I could revise them. That is to say, these rankings aren't my subjective opinions, and I also have contacted the guy who wrote the HBD at Lightspeed, his Substack is in the description, to produce a matrix for my findings, which I will greatly utilize throughout this video, especially so at the end, where I look at how money plays into this. And let me be clear, BreadTube is the worst part of YouTube. There is nothing on YouTube that even approaches the level of damage that is caused by BreadTube. Unlike Joe Rogan's show or Lex Fridman's podcast, it actually encourages and promotes terrible lifestyles which amplify people's depression, encourage poor fitness, while the political ideas promulgated by BreadTube teach intolerance and conformity, and I finally have evidence to support this claim. Heterodox thinking, that is opposite of orthodox thinking, is expressing opinions that differ from the mainstream, correlates negatively with viewership at BreadTube by minus 0.225. That is to say, BreadTube viewership correlates positively by over 0.2 with conformist thinking and close-mindedness, which then correlates at over 0.4 with aggression. In other words, BreadTube incentivizes people that are more aggressive and that are more close-minded. Now, you're probably wondering, how the hell did I come up with this? Well, let me explain. The selection criteria for this was rather simple. Every BreadTuber had to go past the threshold of at least 50k views a month, being political and located on Noah Samsen's and other BreadTubers lists. So I had to remove Demon Mama, Professor Flowers, The Serfs, and Peter Coffin, because although they are undoubtedly BreadTubers and very aggressive ones indeed, they did not meet the threshold. At the same time, actual Marxists like Hakim and Bad Empanada and conservative communists like Jackson Hinkle and Haas aren't included on the list. Also, I did not include any major companies or organizations like the Grayville Institute, simply for the reason that BreadTube is not about companies, it's about individuals. So only 41 BreadTubers have passed the threshold and were included in my list, which was then divided into multiple categories, including the following: video essays, casual videos, and debate bros. As expected, casual videos were watched the most because it's the lowest common denominator. However, essay format correlated with Patreon earnings the most at 0.25, while it received the least amount of views. Funny enough, the essay format was found to be the most aggressive and orthodox out of the other categories, while I traditionally assumed that this place would go to debate bros, correlating with aggression at 0.2 and with orthodox thinking at 0.15. And how did I determine how aggressive or unorthodox someone's content is? Heterodox was defined as the ability to disagree with orthodox leftist assumptions, with Vash scoring somewhere in the middle, ContraPoint scoring very high, the only person who scored high by the way, and Lily Orchard scoring very low. Here's a small sample by the way.
This has been a running problem with Ian in that when it comes to white people, he wants all that ooh-woo democratic socialism, but when it comes to anyone else, he's usually all about mass ethnic cleansing. Jewish people living on stolen land and doing ethnic cleansing, he wants to nuke the civilians. White people living on stolen land and doing ethnic cleansing, well, stopping him from doing that is hurting him specifically, so he doesn't like that. This class-first socialism has always been extremely vulnerable to this kind of white supremacist thinking. And make no mistake, Ian is a white supremacist. You can make all the ooh-woo wives of the proletariat speeches you want, accusing people of color of wanting to genocide white people or suggesting that there's merit to the conspiracy theory that Jewish people control global banking is pretty fucking telling. Ian's Wikipedia page has to clarify his politics as self-described left-wing. That's how bad he is at being left-wing. We all just have to take his word for it most of the time. Give people enough time, they'll show you who they are. You just have to stop ignoring it.
Aggression is determined by the extent to which the content creator advocates for violence, supports terrorism, fear-mongering, targeting people, and through various similar metrics. To give you an example again, Big Joel scores low, Hassan Abi scores medium, and Lily Orchard scores high.
Very emotionally stunted white man with all of the opinions of someone who didn't get beaten up enough in high school. My identity is not a democracy. It's not a matter of opinion. It is a totalitarian state. I will tell you what my name and pronouns are, and disagreement is not an option if you like having all of your teeth. And this is the case for everyone. Disagreement with an individual's identity is not an opening for debate. It is not an opening for fierce opposition. They are not to be entertained, they are to be shunned and alienated entirely. The fact is, there isn't some secret mystery as to why this wealthy, conventionally attractive white woman is so hostile to criticism. She just doesn't care, because she's just another white girl with bad opinions. But she did get me thinking about who I want my content to appeal to, because I don't want neo-Nazis liking my channel or my writing. I go out of my way to be as hostile to them as possible. I just don't care about conservative white men and their problems. Because to be that kind of person, I'd have to be someone that other LGBT people don't feel safe around. And I'd have to be someone that people of color don't feel safe around. And I don't want to be that kind of person.
Now, I know there might be some disagreements, but I think generally I'm probably 90% accurate in estimating their aggression and unorthodoxy levels. Then there's age, it's just millennials and zoomers. There might be 3 persons who are Gen X, but I counted them as millennials because I wasn't sure. Gender, pretty self-evident here, I went by their own self-identification, and believe me, almost all of them had made sure that we know what their gender is, and yes, of course, trans people were greatly overrepresented, and if you want to know the reasons why, then I recommend you to check out my other video on the topic. For sexuality, people who have never talked about their sexuality were just assumed to be straight by default, that is to say, the number of queers is likely higher than just 61%. Now, when it comes to race, it's more or less self-evident as well. BreadTube is pretty white. It's also not very Jewish, I suppose, if you want to understand.
Why is this the case?
Then I recommend you to watch my other video on Jewish assimilation that I did, but the main takeaway is that because Jews are intermarrying with Gentiles, their average IQ declines, so they aren't able to be influential in this generation's most popular leftist online space. Now, why there are so many white people, you ask? Well, I'm not ready to discuss this issue yet, but you can watch my other video titled Leftism as a Mental Disorder, from which you can generally derive what I'm going to say. The political orientation was not coded properly, so I will largely skip it, except I'll say that very few channels have actually focused on leftist theory, because much of the channels have either focused on consumption culture or drama. Now, this goes in line with my observations proposed in a video titled ContraPoints: The Fall of Socialism on BreadTube. Now, whether someone was married or not didn't have any meaningful effects either way. While the average amount of Patreon subscribers that these people had was sort of amazing. 2,000. That's right. The average amount of Patreon subscribers that these BreadTubers had was 2,000. While the average amount of monthly earnings just from Patreon alone was estimated to be around 20k. Now, you figure that with all of this money that they're making, they'll be supporting the poor and making videos about the people who are really marginalized and are living from paycheck to paycheck, so to speak. Well, boy, oh boy, welcome to BreadTube. The first rule of BreadTube: never mention economics. Just 26 videos out of 410 that were examined, or 0.6 out of every 10 less videos every BreadTuber made on average, had addressed the economic plight in one way or another. And it is likely an overestimation, as whenever capitalism, corporations, or similar things were included in the thumbnail or the title, it was marked as economic related on my spreadsheet. Like with this video by Kristen Leo, even though it might focus on the upper class experiences with capitalism or just a critique of the lower class capitalistic consumption, which doesn't focus on addressing the issues that actual working class people are facing, and instead pretty much contains stuff about consumption culture. Now, believe it or not, but I've also included personal economic plight videos like this one by Vadim into concern about the economic plight or economic related in general. That is to say, the economic videos are probably not 26 out of 410, but somewhere around 15 or 10. The channels that focused on economic plight the most were determined to be these ones, one by Vicky1999 and Tom Nicholas, 4 and 5 videos respectively. On the other hand, a lot more videos looked into the trans issues, which is the second rule of BreadTube: talk about trans issues. The numbers are 1.6 video out of 10 on average was about trans issues. Samantha Lux and Jamie Dodger, who are both transgenders, produced the most amount of trans content, which was estimated to be around 70% of their last videos. However, given that they are both trans and not entirely political, I have decided to remove all casual related style videos that aren't 80% political from the equation, and the finalists were Jesse Gender 6, CountryPoints 5, James Somerton 5, Kefals 5, and Sean 5, which is quite a lot. Out of all of BreadTubers, just 41% didn't make transgenders their thumbnail or put in the title of their videos in their last 10 videos, while about 36% of BreadTubers talked about capitalism, their own economic life or economic consumption or corporations or similar things in one way or another, at least in their last 10 videos. Furthermore, just 4 BreadTubers out of 41 have directly addressed the issues faced by the working class in one way or another. And out of my own interest, I have opened up the first right-wing YouTuber that I had in mind to find out that on their last 10 videos, 2 talked about the issues that are faced by the working class, while 2 videos talk directly about the economic plight of the working class, which again shows where people's priorities are. Also, I want to say that the gay videos were not included into the trans videos variable, so a channel like this one, which had made almost every single video about themselves being gay, was not included into the trans variable. That is to say, if I were to replace trans issues with identity politics, just multiply this number by at least 3. While if we reduce the amount of videos about the working class, not blacks, not queers, not white women, not video games, not movies, or certain cultural phenomena, that'd probably be about 5 videos in total. But strangely enough, identity politics was not the most popular category, and although I didn't quantify it, the most amount of content and views was related to popular culture and consumption. If you want to know more about this, then I suggest you to watch the video where I made the case that BreadTube in itself promotes consumption culture and capitalism, which, as we will see soon, is actually supported by the data. And now, here's the juicy part that you've been waiting for. Patreon earnings correlates with trans videos at 0.25, but Patreon counts negatively correlates with economic videos. That is to say, BreadTube and the left in general aren't interested in helping the poor or talking about economics, which we already kinda know ourselves is true, because if economics were actually important, then class and not education, race or gender would predict voting behavior, or the culture war was around economics. But in case you needed that extra confirmation, here it is. But at the same time, it's not so simple. While trans videos are largely popular, they negatively correlate with viewership of the channel, albeit weaker than the negative correlation between economics and viewership. So people aren't interested. However, what's important is that there is a monetary incentive to BreadTube. Being trans has a correlation of about 0.3 to monthly Patreon earnings. In my first ever video on BreadTube, I speculated that the reason PhilosophyTube had decided to become trans was because of his white male privilege that he felt guilty for. However, after I've seen this figure, I think that there could be a monetary incentive as well. That is to say, although people want to see it less than, let's say, Roblox, MP3, trans stuff has a great correlation with money. Thereby, creators have monetary incentives to make more trans videos, thereby further exacerbating a trend which isn't really bottom up as much as it is top down. And then you're left wondering why about 5% of our younger generation is trans or non-binary. That is, once again, capitalism works to promote and encourage this sort of behavior. So please make your own conclusions, libertarian gentlemen. And finally, if you want to access my data, it is linked on Telegram. I'm not posting it on YouTube because there is no way you can download files here, so go there instead. Also, consider supporting me and other right-wing content creators on Subscribestar so we aren't incentivized to follow the trends, and thank you for watching.